Good morning. Welcome to Finance Malta. I'm Vanessa MacDonald on behalf of Finance Malta. And I've done so many of these Women's Day events, and it's always a thrill because you get to meet the movers and shakers of today's world. And today is no different. We're very pleased to have with us Paulianne and Nwoko from Apex Fund Services, Managing Director. We also have Geraldine Spiteri who's the head of the Malta Business Registry, and Ruth Agius Scicluna, who's the head of advisory of FJVA. So, before we start, perhaps I'd just put everything into some kind of context, because what we've done today is we're trying to do a SWOT analysis of where women are. When I first started doing these events, things were extremely different. Let's just take a couple of figures. I know it's difficult to listen to numbers, but in 2006, there were only 30% of women who were available for work who were actually in employment. And I'm really happy to say that at the moment, that number has now gone up to 72.7%. So almost 3/4 of the women who can work are doing so. But perhaps even more significant is the fact that when you look at the over 25 cohort, we are at 83.1%, which makes us, well above the EU average, which was only 79.8 back in 2020. But also for that cohort, we're one of the best in the EU. So clearly, things have changed enormously. But are there still things that we should be aspiring to? Hence our idea of doing this as a SWOT analysis. So let's have a look. I thought we would break this down. Let's start with the S, the strengths. And we have 3 different things that we can discuss about the strengths of women in the workforce. Not necessarily in finance, but obviously all of you come from a background which requires that particular focus. So more cultural awareness, the fact that both from the female side and the male side, whether things have changed, friendly measures, specifically friendly as opposed to just focusing on the women, but also on the male participation side, and also something which was extremely important because it was a policy decision which helped female participation, which was childcare provision. So Paulianne, perhaps you'd like to talk about what do you see as the strengths of women in finance or in employment?
Certainly. I mean, it is very much proven that women in leadership positions make companies more successful. And this is not only around having better diversity in thought, but better also coverage of your customer base, for example. If you're a service provider and you're providing a service to both male and female counterparts. And again, having women in positions that are taking decisions, that are covering and are coming with the ideas, covering both spectrum, both male and female typology, I would say, helps us in having more successful companies. Women bring different strengths to a board, for example, and this is also proven from statistics. So these are all good attributes that we cannot ignore or do without. There's always more to gain and nothing to lose, I would say, for us to continue promoting and continue strengthening the position of women in more leadership positions.
Talking about women in leadership positions, Geraldine, you're far from being the only one, although obviously it's very important that you are there. But we now have a female head of the Chamber of Small Businesses. We have another woman, because she's not the first, leading the Malta Chamber of Commerce. We have Roberta Metsola representing us at the top level of the European Parliament. So again, give us your own view of this idea that, what has changed since 2006?
So having a woman in a leadership position makes a lot of sense in the sense that as women, we speak the same language, the same as men do speak the same language between themselves. So as a woman, women in general, we are all known to be multitaskers. So that is one of, I think, the best task that a woman can give, is that she can multitask. And yes, I have other counterparts that are women in this field, that it's important that when we are dealing, say, on businesses, as you rightly mentioned, there are other female leaders that are leading this subject. It's also important, diversity in the board meetings. It is really important that you have aspect. When we say diversity in board meetings, is not just only gender, it's age, etc. But today we're focusing more on gender. So the importance of having the views of both genders. As in relation to our entity, we have a lot of family-friendly measures. As MBR, we have also been recognized as having a quality mark for our employees as well. And here we are talking about equality, not just women incentives.
Which is one of the things which has changed so dramatically. It's
So-
no longer seen as being only the female remit
Exactly.
to do this.
So if, for example, within our entity, we have childcare facilities. So employees...
Here in Zaytoun, which is amazing, yes.
Exactly. So within our premises, on the ground floor, we have the facilities that employees can bring their children after school, they do the homework, and then they go back with their parents.
I remember different places, even in Imrahil, I remember there was a firm which had tried to introduce childcare and it hadn't really worked. So
Yes.
why is this one working? Is it just a case of, it was, you know, the previous ones were perhaps before their time?
Yeah, this one is working perfectly. It is used by both male and female employees. So that in itself says a lot as well. So we're not just catering for women, but also for those male employees that are taking care of their children, because their women are also working.
Of course, that's the corollary to
so-
all of these women working, is now the balance between, you know, what the male and the female have to do within the home and, you know, taking children to after school, or even if they don't have children, just running their household, has
Exactly.
obviously had to change.
So in relation to childcare facilities, it's being used 50-50 by male and female. So the childcare facilities, perhaps when we've started this project some 4 years ago, perhaps the management at that time thought that it would be used more by women, but in reality it's proving not the other way around. It's a 50-50 kind of scenario. And then in summer we have the summer school as well, and the amounts triple. So in summer we'll have around some 35-40 kids coming to our premises, and they do a lot of activities while their parents are working. And as well, this is proving to be really important, because if you have an individual that individual would like to work on a full-time basis, perhaps in the past the couple would reconsider whether they can work both on full-time basis. Like this, there's no need for one of them to be on reduced, because you have the peace of mind that there's your child at the childcare center, they're doing the homework, they can even eat here, so we're totally covered from that end.
What a wonderful difference. And Ruth, what about you? How do you
Yes,
see the strengths of females in the workforce?
Yes, I think going back a little bit, I think that there has been the start of a culture change, in the sense that at some point there was the recognition that there is a lot of talent out there which is not being tapped into. And basically probably that was the starting point why it was recognized that women need to be helped to kind of extract the talent and make sure that it is used properly. And the support system started kicking in. As was mentioned before, the idea is not just to focus on women, because it's not women on their own. At the end, there has to be a synergy. Men and women in reality complement each other, whether it's at home or at the workplace. Men can bring certain ideas, certain positive things to the workplace. Women have other things to contribute, and together, I believe, they make the workplace a better place, you know, and they can also provide a better service to clients. So I think if we focus on that, we need to focus, consequentially, we have to focus more on providing family-friendly measures, not just women-oriented, it's the family at the end of the day, because both parents have the responsibility to take care of the family, and also the children need to see this. And that ties into the culture change as well, because as children grow up, they are seeing all these things. So we're catering for the future as well. If children continue seeing that it's always the mother who has to handle certain things, in their mind, it's going to be ingrained that it's the mother who's going to eventually, if there's a girl in the family, she's going to think that it's her role eventually, that's what her role is going to be. Whereas if she's seeing, and even the boys, if they're seeing that their parents both have to contribute and both have things to contribute, both in the home and outside the home, then they're going to grow up with that mentality. And it's going to be easier for them to, you know, act that way in the future. With respect to childcare, I think we also saw the remote working facilities kicking in. It is something that is very, very important, especially when children cannot attend the childcare because they're unwell for some reason or another, that they cannot be with other children, you know. So the remote working is also a very important tool for parents to
And of course, it's not just, as Geraldine was saying, when you've got the summer school, when you know and you can plan ahead for it. But if you've got a child who's sick, it's usually you wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and have to reorganize your entire day.
Exactly.
But it's not necessarily the woman who does that. It's possibly even the man who can now, who should be able to really.
Exactly. In fact, all these measures should, and I believe they are, I mean, when they are introduced, are available also to men, because at the end of the day, both have the responsibility and both have, you know, the need to have these facilities at hand so that they can juggle all these things. At the end, if all these things are in place and people can actually continue working, whether it's a male or a female, I mean, at the end, everybody's going to benefit, you know.
It's not only working, it's also, I think, the opportunity to progress. So I think one of the things which I think is, again, more numbers, how awful, but if you look at the NSO, the National Statistics Office recent report, out of 33,000 managers overall, people classified as employed who are managers, 11,800. So, you know, almost 12,000 out of 33,000 are female. And professionals, out of 59 people classified as professionals, we had 30,500 who are female. So what we're seeing is not only more females in the workforce, but also more females progressing to managerial level. And there's a fabulous ESG portal being run by the government, and I managed to get, they were super helpful and gave me a number of metrics. And in the last year or so, there was a 7% increase in women in management, an 8.8% increase in the women in the workforce, which we knew this, but also a 4.7% increase in women in board positions. So I think that sometimes we don't realize how far we've come. And it's, as I say, all the boards I've taken part in and Women's Day messages, it's always a case of, wow, look how many fantastic women there are out there who just very quietly just get on with it and reach the top, which I think is extremely important. So those are very much the strengths that we have covered. Let's now pick on some of those very, very same points that you've made to talk about the weaknesses. And over here, what we identified as the weaknesses was the focus on women rather than parents. How many people have said, my husband helped around the house, like it's our job and he was doing us a favor, okay? How many times is it taken for granted if a child wakes up sick, that the woman has more flexibility with regards to staying at home than the male does? The other point that we'd like to discuss is parenting breaks. What impact does that have on career progression? And of course, again, either male or female can decide to take breaks. So this is a weakness in the system which we have to be aware of. And also self-doubt. We are our own worst enemies. We don't push ourselves maybe for promotions, etc. So let's start with the downside of this female-male debate. So, Paulianne, what's your impression of this? Is this still a thing, or is it just me thinking about 10, 20 years ago?
No, it is still there. I think we still carry a lot of what we call unconscious bias. And although many feel that they do not distinguish between sort of comparing what males and women can give or can provide into leadership roles, there are these unconscious bias that are so ingrained in us that sometimes we don't even realize. We subject sort of that males are sort of more decision takers or stronger in certain decisions, while we expect the female to be more kind and more people aware, or sort of the attributes that we're placing, whilst for me those kind of attributes can also play as strengths. So going back to what was said, it very much starts from when we are young, how we're building that culture to continue reducing, because obviously we are different from a few years ago, continue reducing from this unconscious bias. And when the managers and senior management are taking decisions on selecting who are they going to promote, are they internally having the debate, a woman with children will be sort of less committed to her job than a woman without children, for example, or sort of someone that they're getting married in the next year, the next will be children, sort of, will she be committed to work? These are unconscious bias.
It might be illegal, but it doesn't stop people from...
That's it, from thinking.
And you'll never find out, will you, if you don't get that
at
job
the end,
or you
these
don't
are
get
what
that promotion.
these are what decisions are based on, and at the end have a ripple effect on where we go. So I think that matter, it's still something that we have continue to work on and evolving, starting from a much earlier age.
Geraldine, I mean, how do you fight this if you're a corporate? Because I mean, as Paulianne said, very often these are they're not even conscious decisions, they're just subconscious ones.
Yes, and as you perfectly described it, although it might be illegal not to employ someone because of gender,
because they
or age.
might get pregnant, for example. Can you imagine? We used to be asked that. Do you intend to get pregnant?
Today it's completely, you cannot ask it. However, having said this, I still believe, I'm not one of them, but I still believe that some take into consideration that the age of a person and whether she can potentially become pregnant within the next few months or years. So yes, and there's other issues of nature as well. Talking from my side, my husband is very much involved in the upbringing of my 5-year-old son. However, when my son is sick, the first person who calls is mommy. And sometimes my husband is, when I have meetings, etc., and I cannot do otherwise, he just take the role and stay with the kid when he's sick. Mm-hmm. However, still, when I just open the door, he'll come running on me, Mom, thank God you're finally back. So, and I believe that's, I don't know whether that's culture or that's nature, that the children are more inclined perhaps towards their mother.
To cuddle, yes.
It's a boy. I don't know. So there are also these issues. And again, I think, okay, I'm 36 years old, so I didn't, my mother was a housewife, so I didn't imagine my father taking care of me. And for example, my son is totally different in the sense that he knows that if I have to go a meeting after work, after 5, he's going to stay with his father, etc. So my situation when I was a child was totally different. And that's perhaps sometimes I still think that I need to plan for my family. So if my son wakes up sick, I take it upon me to plan the day ahead, so to call the doctor, etc. So I think the next generation would be much more, I don't know, inclined to having shared responsibilities more than I do, for example. In relation to MBR and the point that you were mentioning, we have 50 female employees and 50 male, and 60% of them are in managerial position. And this is a much higher amount than it was years ago. It can be that even the family-friendly measures that we are encouraging at our workplace as well.
Yeah, and of course it helps with recruitment. Ruth?
Yes, I think when making these assessments, sometimes I think we miss a focal point, because in reality, when assessing someone, whether it's for a promotion or for taking the job or whatever it is, we need to look at productivity. Unfortunately, I think we still have a bit of the mentality that, you know, it's how many hours you put in, or whether it's you're constantly at your desk from 8 till 5 and all these things, which in reality do not measure productivity. You can have someone who is, I always say this, 24 hours at his desk, and he wouldn't produce anything worth it, you know. And then you have someone who works for an hour, just to give an extreme example, and you say, wow, you know, this is what the person has produced. So I think the ways in which we assess people and their talent and their what they can bring to the workplace should change. This fixed schedule of working 8 to 5 or whatever it is. I mean, you can have someone who has, I speak for myself, when I was on maternity leave, there were still things that needed me. I felt responsible that I should still be involved in, even though I was on maternity leave and the maternity leave was being respected, but I felt responsible to take them on. If I had to do something when the baby is asleep, whether it's at night, whether it's at 6 o'clock in the morning, whatever time it is, it needs to be done. I will find the time to do it. Where there is a will, there is a way.
We were talking about, you know, having to stop whatever we're doing for Teams calls, even when we're on leave, even
exactly.
You know, if you're commuting somewhere. I mean, I know someone who was working from a laptop, waiting to check into his flight. So it's, you know,
exactly, and that is also the world we're living in. Why are we highlighting that it's because the woman is on maternity leave, or because has a baby, or she's getting married, or whatever it is? I mean, there are so many other things that even men have their own things that, you know, other than work, and they juggle, and, you know, there are these things where they adapt and do things. But then you assess the productivity. What do you assess? That he wasn't there at 8 o'clock in the morning, or that when he was on holiday, he made the time to take the necessary call, have the necessary meeting, whatever it is, you know. That should be the benchmark of assessing people.
In fact, that was one of the points that we wanted to discuss in this context, which is the parenting break. Because obviously, if you are deciding to become a parent, whether you're male or female, quite apart from the pregnancy, who looks after the child and has a priority perhaps to stay at home, as now, it's also something which has changed a lot culturally, and it's become much more acceptable and so on. However, one of the drawbacks of taking a parenting break used to be, gosh, I'm going to be out of the workforce for a year or two, or, you know, there's no reason why people don't stop for years at a time. Is it then much more difficult to get back into the workforce? And does it mean that you're losing out on the career development, the promotion side of it?
I personally feel that the hardest bit of it is keeping up with the changes, especially in the finance area. I mean,
regulatory, my gosh.
It's daily. The changes are literally daily, you know. So, I mean, I would feel it very hard myself if I had to, let's say, stop for 2 years, for example, because the landscape, as we said, is so dynamic that it's very difficult to keep up. Not because somebody is forcing you or telling you, no, if you stop for 2 years, your career development is going to stop. It's the reality more than anything. So I personally would promote more having the necessary measures in place, giving the flexibility maybe to even work reduced hours for periods of time, or even working long periods of time only from home, for example, but at least keeping in touch, you know, not stopping completely, because the keeping in touch and at least keeping abreast with the changes, and even if you don't know the detail, but knowing that they're happening and you're not completely out of it, will make the transition back into it completely much easier.
SWOT, but if I may, use the threats first. Why? Because we want to end up on opportunities. We want to end up on the high point and not on the negatives. We've had so many years where we've had to, fight and so on. And I think now, today, at least, I think this panel wants deliberately to choose the more positive sides to how far we've come and how much further we'd like to go. But there are threats. One of them is whether there is a glass ceiling. So although we've got so many managers, how many women actually break through from managers to more executive level, chief officer level, C-suite? Remote working, is it equitable? We've mentioned this as well already in passing, but again, it is definitely one of the threats that, women, the focus seems to be that if a woman is working from home, she's going to have young kids running around who are going to distract her. Okay, we're not all at the age where we have very young children. Let me remind you of that. And also one of the other things which Geraldine touched upon a little bit, which was, hey, listen, let us be careful what we want, because with success come sacrifices. So I think one of the wonderful things is that we have not been driven from a young age to only equate success with being at the top of the ladder. So maybe we can discuss those 3 points. Paulianne, back to you.
So, listen, at the end of the day, there's the effort required. Organizations need to make sure that, if necessary, where we need to reinvent the wheel, we need to reinvent the wheel to make sure that we are making the remote working work for everyone, or that we're making these weaknesses or threats sort of survive. And we've saw that, like during the pandemic, for example, we've seen organizations that before would have never imagined giving employees opportunity to work from home or remote working or a meeting via call. That's now is part of their success. So if we're presented with a challenge, organizations need to be up there to make sure that they are reinventing the wheel around these threats. There's a lot to gain, so it's important that we remain focused on it. Another aspect is also understanding when we're talking about, for example, we've mentioned remote working. Not every company, not every individual has the same demands. So it's difficult to have one policy that needs to fit everyone the same. So once again, it is the initiative of the organizations to understand not only this is the policy of the company, you have to abide by it, but what will make my workforce be more productive, be more happy, because at the end, a happy workforce is a more productive workforce, and adapt to their requirements. It helped us also achieve a better work-life balance. And this is not only for people that have family and have kids, but overall. Sometimes even that 30 minutes less commuting, going to the office in the day, not every day, but it's nice having it once, twice a week. Helps you go do some morning jog or something that is more health and beneficial.
Most people hate about their lifestyle is the commute and having to get into the car to go to work.
Exactly. So these are all benefits that we've enjoyed and we want to continue to see flourishing at the end. But it requires commitment from organizations as well. We can't
it's so
stop.
nice to see the emphasis being put on the employer rather than on the employee, because what you're calling for is the next cultural change. We've learned so much from COVID with regards to remote working, etc., but what you're talking about is the fact that we really need flexibility from the side of the employers as well.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Definitely.
Geraldine, you're at the top, so are you creating this? You have a say in this as well. Are you creating a more flexible environment?
Yes, at the MBR for sure. And after the pandemic, We have a lot of flexibility. And what I find also useful is that the fact that I'm a woman myself, the women employees don't just call me and tell me afraid and their fear telling me that they are going to work from home because they have a sick child or that their mother is sick, because we are not talking about just women that are mothers, but also have instances whereby we have individuals that are taking care of their parents or someone else within the family. And I think, knowing that I have my own struggles at home, they can comfortably give me a call and tell me, look, today, if you don't mind, I'm going to work from home. I'm not going to start at 8, and I'm not going to just stop between 12 and half 12. I'm going to make my own hours, but I will deliver what I have to deliver. And I'm fine with that. And we use a lot of this flexibility at the MBR. I always see what we want to achieve, what is the goal. So I don't care whether you're doing the job between 9 to 5. If you're doing it during the night, it's okay as long as the deadline is reached. I really like the metaphor you've used, the glass ceiling one. In itself, it shows progress and improvements, because we are no longer talking about, and even the statistics you read shows that we are no longer dealing with sticky floors, that is, the woman is stuck to a clerical position or AA. There are some instances where an individual, not just a woman, are comfortable in that position and they do the job brilliantly and they don't intend to progress in life, and that's okay. However, now we are at least talking about glass ceiling, that you've on top of the ladder, but you cannot break the glass. From my side, I've managed to break that, but it comes at a cost. So if I take from my personal life, I don't have hobbies. So my hobbies are just parked, and my priority is work and family. And it depends, even priority, when you have something in the family, the sickness, the family will come first. But when you have working on an important deadline at work, then work comes first. So although I just cannot say my priority is always work or always family, you have to adapt in accordance with the situation. So basically, for example, I work a lot during the night in order to try and find that 3 hours within which I can play a bit with my son, will do the homework, etc. So when he goes to sleep, I start seeing the emails, etc. As long as that individual is fine with it, so why not? You have to be innovative when you reach certain levels. For example, in the morning, we are all really busy and everyone getting the lunch done, etc. So I chose that I take my son to school, so that we'll have, thank God we have traffic, so I have that 1 hour driving from home to school, and we chat about things, we joke. So being in these positions, have to be innovative and making use of the time in the best way possible. But it comes at a cost, so you cannot just say that, okay, I'm now in a leadership position and I'm fine and that's it. So
yeah, as long as somebody comes to do the vacuuming for you, it's much more complex than that.
Exactly.
Ruth.
Yes, and continuing from what Geraldine was saying, it's the risk in this situation is that you sometimes you feel that you're close to burnout, basically. Mm-hmm. So, and that is what we have to be mindful of, because if women reach a certain level and then basically, you know, it has to stop, because that's as much as they can give, because at the end they are still juggling 2 lives, you know, so they are still have the responsibility, the huge responsibility at work, the huge responsibility of the family, whether it's shared or not with anyone else, you know. So it's there and it's on the mind, you know. I mean, sometimes even if, let's say, somebody else is taking care of your sick child, you're still thinking, you know, I hope he's okay, you know, I hope he's being given the medicine, I hope this, I hope that, you know. So it's still on the mind. It's difficult to, I mean, it's not natural not to, you know, to say I cut off completely and no, it's in someone else's hands. You're talking of a person here, you know, not of a thing, and people obviously come first, whatever it is. So that's one of the risks that kind of I see, the threat that I see with respect to women reaching a certain level. The other thing I wanted to mention briefly is that when it comes to flexibility, it's extremely important, as we all agree. It is also very important that kind of from the employee side, there's a trust matter here. I mean, you can be flexible if you know that you can trust the person. You can trust the person that if you agreed with the person that, okay, it's fine, do the job whenever you can do it, as long as you do it. We're not going to stay on your back saying you did it at 8, you did it at 10, whatever it is. But then the employer has to respect the trust, has to acknowledge that there is the trust being placed on him or her, and make sure then that he delivers. So it has to work both ways, because it's true, a lot is said that from the employer side we have to give flexibility, and it's extremely important, but then, as we said, it has to work both ways, otherwise
one of the things that we mentioned was the self-doubt that maybe women don't think they can actually progress, and also the glass ceiling. Is there such a thing anymore? Does it exist, the glass ceiling? Or the women who are making it, is that proof that really...
I believe there is a bit of a natural element to how women maybe are wired, that we are a bit more conscious before taking decisions. We need everything planned in front of us. We don't go for something unless we're very sure. Whilst males naturally are maybe more adventurous in sort of going for it
Yeah.
without maybe feeling even ready. Even simple things like asking for a pay rise, it is very much proven in statistics again that females are a bit more reserved to go for a pay rise even if they feel they deserve it when compared to
so maybe
males.
we're not actually being held down, maybe we're just not pushing ourselves because we don't think we can make it. But now the more role models there are,
exactly,
and the more people get to management level, the more chances there are that they will naturally then progress to senior or obviously executive levels. So let's hope
that's
that
why
will happen.
Initiatives like mentorships, like this type of training are also very important. That will help us to break that ceiling, hopefully.
Just very quickly before we go on to the last section, which will be opportunities, perhaps one of the things that is worth mentioning is looking at it maybe from my aspect. We've talked a lot about keeping women in the workforce, and we have to bear in mind that, first of all, not all women opt to become, not all couples decide to have children. But also the time where the children actually need us is only, maybe 15 years of our lives, and after that you no longer have the responsibility of caring for them in that sort of fundamental way. And that is out of a 40 to 45 year career. So, really, we have to start thinking about if we want to keep women in the workforce. And that is one of the things that we will talk about, the tight labour market, for example. We want women who are experienced to stay there longer. But one of the threats that perhaps doesn't get taken into account often enough is the work-life balance at the end of our lives. So speaking as somebody who's now well into her 60s, the problem is that I am now no longer looking at work-life balance with regards to looking after my children, but it's now my children's children and trying to support my children when it comes to their caring for their children, but also the fact that our parents are living so much longer, and obviously the amount of care they require when they're in their 80s is phenomenally more than it is with a child who is sick for a day at school. You're talking about parents who are in hospital who require visiting and so on and so forth for weeks at a time. So it's actually much harder now, and maybe that is the topic we will have in Women's Days going forward, to think about the work-life balance, to keep women there. Because if women drop out of the workforce by the time they're in their mid-50s, the chances of them getting into boards and C-suite is obviously going to be a lot less. Let's end on opportunities. And we've mentioned a little bit about mentoring programs, but I'd like to hear a lot more about what you do in your own companies. The fact that there's a very tight labour market is also means that women, if there were, 100 people applying for a job, then maybe women or women of a certain age or women who might become pregnant and so on would be at disadvantage. Now you're lucky to have anybody applying. So I think people are being taken very much, and also cultural awareness. I mean, there are a lot of blind applications now in companies where you don't even know the gender or the nationality or background, cultural background of a person. And also diversity and what it brings to boards or management. We've seen that there's been an increase in the number of people on boards, although the average age is still 58, which is way too high. As you were saying, diversity is something else. And maybe one of the discrimination, positive discrimination and quotas are something that we could discuss under opportunities, because maybe that is something that will help improve our awareness of what women can achieve. So, Paulianne, I'm against quotas. And I'm not sure. I believe we're all actually against quotas. So.
I think we feel that we can provide much better. We can get women more into board and leadership positions by giving more opportunity, more awareness than with quotas. A simple, for example, where I work, my organization has initiated what we call Women Accelerator Program, which is part of our sort of EDI initiatives to ensure overall we are more diverse. And what does this program do? This program is selecting around 80 women within our global organization. We're over 12,000 people globally. Every year, and helping in through mentoring, training, talks, and also helping each other out, creating this sort of network of people. I was part of it during the last year, and it helps a lot. It helps you understand yourself better. It helps you understand sort of where you really want to go, where you really need, what you really need to work on. And these are types of initiatives and assistance that we need to see more in the workplace. And it's organizations that need to help, and moving away with quotas, this is what we can do to naturally get more women within our C-suite level and within boards.
Geraldine.
Personally, I'm against quotas in the sense that I'm involved in a lot of boards, and I'll be in meetings that I'm the only woman, unfortunately. And sometimes I feel alone, literally, and sometimes I have to struggle to make my point, believe it or not. Some might think I'm exaggerating, but it's not the case. There are some instances that I don't know whether because it's a woman or not, but that's how I feel. Sometimes men are speaking their own language, and for a woman to make her point, I need to struggle and be assertive. My character is that. So I believe that if I'm there with a quota, this is going to be worse.
So much worse.
Because they would say, she's just here to just satisfy the number, so let's ignore her. She doesn't know anything. We just need a woman on the board, and she's the one chosen. So that's why I'm against quotas. At the MBR, we do not have as such any programs that are targeted to women. And even myself being a woman, I always try to lead in the sense that it's for everyone. Measures are for everyone. And it's not because I'm a woman, I'm entitled to that, but because I have certain responsibilities, the issues that I need to tackle. It's more of a culture, more than anything.
And Ruth?
Yes. I think what we need to focus on is recognition of talent. As I started with this, and I will finish off with this, because in reality, if we focus on recognizing talent, you need the quotas. You don't need specific programs, because at the end the talent is in the person, whether the person is male, female, whatever it is, you know. So, and as a firm, I think our CEO is Adriana Solo, is a woman as well, and she's always promoting this. It has always been like that from day one, that talent is recognized and rewarded. So whether it happens to be a woman that is the person who brought the talent and has to be recognized, it's a woman. If it's a man, same story. You know, so let's focus on that, and we try to extract the best talent possible from the people that we are investing in. We have university full of students. Let's make sure that we don't end up with a brain drain because they go somewhere else because their talent is not recognized.
Wow, what a fantastic panel it has been. I think there are some very important key messages which have come out of today's discussion. One is, wow, we've really come such a long way. Two, that this has been possible because of changes in cultural awareness. However, there are things that we need to do going forward. And I think I can summarize by saying that we need a lot more flexibility with regards to terms and conditions of our employment, with a much heavier emphasis on flexibility, on actual talent, and very importantly also on productivity. Of course, a number of physical external factors which have helped, like the creation of childcare centres, etc. So all I can do, and mentoring programs. So all I can say is thank you very much. I can't wait to do another one of these one day and be able to look back and see even more progress for women and for men across Malta. Thank you so much for being with us. And thank you very much to Finance Malta.